The LNG is bad for the lake and lots of the earth. We can't do it all. We gotta stop it before it comes. It's bad. We only need it for electricity.
Readjust for the little height difference here. I'll do my best to keep this as focused on the strap, the soil, the contamination that is on the site, because I know that is the focus of this, but we can't separate that out from anything else because it is part of a much bigger project, and you would not be even here, we would not be talking about this if it weren't for that much bigger project. To start off with, I also wanted to cite something from the DEM regulations for this in section 1.04 of the DEM rules and regulations for the investigation and remediation of hazardous material releases. Quote, individuals should have a timely, meaningful way to participate in decisions that impact them, and that public participation in its best form is an ongoing, two-way process that benefits both the public and the agency. The department defines public participation as people getting timely and accurate information, being heard at meaningful times, and if interested, contributing to the development of a workable solution. Now, I don't know if anyone here knows the backstory. We've mentioned that we've been fighting for this, asking for this meeting for the past year. We did it because of these regulations that are here that allow the petition to initiate a public involvement plan process. National Grid went to the feds to try to get away from it and saying, these state regulations don't apply. We don't have to abide by them. We don't have to follow them. We're just going to go to FERC, who's known as the rubber stamp agency. So we've been fighting with all kinds of techno-babble and staying up late at night writing words upon words upon words to fight for getting this meeting here in the first place. And it's interesting that it's being set up as a technical information session rather than how DEM defines public participation, which is around meaningful involvement in decision making. So part of these regulations also mean that we get to say, you are presenting your plans for the site, we have the right to present other plans for the site, what we think would be a better way to remediate this site. Because part of the area that you are looking at has already been covered with a cap. It's already been partially remediated in the past, and capped, meaning there's still toxins there, but it's covered up. And now you're peeling back that cover. Why? Not to remediate it. You're peeling it back so that you can build this new facility. And the past remediations that happened just conveniently happened to happen right before you tried, before it was National Grid, it was Keyspan LNG, you were doing some remediation right beforehand, because then in 2005, your application for an LNG import facility got turned down because it does not meet current safety standards. So there's a long history here. I'd like to talk a little bit about what that history is. This site has been heavily industrialized since 1910. So going back over a century from the earliest days of the fossil fuel industry. So the manufactured gas plant was the beginnings of the gas industry. That was when they would take coal and they would squeeze it and manufacture gas from that coal. That's why this site is polluted, because of the gas industry at the earliest days. And they would take that really toxic stuff and put it in early rudimentary pipes and use it for lighting the street lanterns and the very beginnings of what is this massive network of pipeline that we have now. So that went from 1910 until 1954. After that, the site has also been used to store liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, that happened for about a decade in the 50s. Gulf Oil used it for kerosene during the 1960s. It's been a toluene facility, an ammonium facility. Toluene, kerosene, LPG, MPG, manufactured gas, these are all fossil fuel products. Then the liquefied natural gas storage tank was built in 1973. It's been there ever since, so it's 40-something years old at this point now. How much longer can that tank actually stay on? How safe is that tank if it wasn't safe enough for an import facility in 2005? But what I want to kind of bring this up for, in terms of what this soil is and this contamination and this tiny little plot of land that you're kind of dividing off and separating out from the rest of this site, and then dividing off and separating off this site from the rest of this whole industrial waterfront there. This is the legacy, the toxic legacy of fossil fuels. And we are all well aware of the impact that this legacy has had on our climate and on the changes that are coming. Even if we stop fossil fuel emissions tomorrow, we're still baked in for some horrifying futures for the next 30, 40, 50 years because of what's been already emitted. So, and our window is getting narrower and narrower and narrower, and given what's going on at the federal level right now, it's up to the states and it's up to local level people to fight these battles to stop climate change. Now, that legacy is not just something that affects the whole planet, it affects the places where it happens. And the fossil fuel industry is environmental racism because of the communities that it impacts directly. Not just from the long-term emissions, but from the toxins, the contaminants, the hazards. These are carcinogenic substances. There are no safe levels of carcinogens. Any exposure can increase your risk of developing cancer. And yes, it's very hard to connect the dots and concretely prove this exposure led to this illness 30 years down the line. It takes cancer that long to develop in the body. So it's really hard. We can't prove it. But we need to have the precautionary principle here right now and say do no harm. There has been enough harm done to this community for a century. This has been a century of fossil fuel impact on this neighborhood. So a word that I want you to think about with this is reparations.
Yes.
As a white person standing here today in this community, the impact that this has had on a Black, Latino, multinational, international community for generations, there has been historical harm. There has been historical damage. The cost of this is being put onto impacted people. This is environmental racism, and you are on the hook for it.
Yes. Not
you personally, the company and the assets that that company bought when it bought Keystone LNG and Southern Union and that whole history going back to 1910. This is what reparations is about. This is what the company owes. So yes, we're saying no more. Yes, we're saying this, when you chop it up into tiny little pieces, it might not look that bad. Yes, it's still over DEM levels. Yes, it's still constituents of concern. Yes, there's things that we can oppose and say, this is not okay. But it's because we need to take this entire cumulative impact into account. And so we live in an ecological world. Our planet is a unified ecological place. We are all part of it. This ecology is based on relationships. But yet our entire regulatory systems break these things down into smaller and smaller little pieces and look at them like a tiny little box with one little thing and then evaluate it and say, it meets the criteria, so therefore it must be approved. But we're missing the big picture, we're missing the cumulative impacts, we're missing the environmental justice impacts, and we're missing what this is all about. And even within this regulatory framework, there's plenty of things that we can do to say we don't want it. And so I think it's interesting that National Grid has fought so hard to not have this apply, and even now that you've been forced to have it apply, that we've convinced FERC of all agencies to say, yes, we need to do this, yes, DEM should take the lead. Here we are, still not really being involved. Here we are, responding to your technical information as if it's kind of fact, this is what you're planning to do, you're notifying the public. We have a right to be meaningfully involved in the decision, and as it's been very clear to you tonight, the public says no. So of course you want to exclude the public, of course you don't want public involvement, because the public says no. Now, another little technical detail that I found in both your FERC application and the DEM piece is that you are saying that this is not an environmental justice area. Because in the DEM regulations, environmental justice areas are defined as being in the top 15% for quote-unquote minority populations or the top 15% for low income, which our community is. But it's based on where people live. And this is an industrial hellhole that it's not where people live in, it's right next to. The only thing separating this site from the community is the highway, which is in itself a factor that affects the air quality, a major factor affecting us. So we have so much going on in this neighborhood already, and you have the gall to say that it's not an environmental justice impact because you define it based on that one little site and say, well, no one lives there, so therefore it doesn't fit. When right across the street on Allen's Ave, Providence Community Health Centers, where people come for their health services, for all their different treatments, all of that, is that not part of a community? That's the street people are driving down when you're saying it's not in the neighborhood. Is that not a neighborhood if there's a health center that people go to right there in between this site and the entrance to the highway? Or if you're going into 95 South, you've got to go up Ernest Street, down Eddy, onto Thurber's. Is that not a neighborhood that trucks are then going on? Whether it's the LNG trucks or the soil management trucks or whatever it might be. And it's interesting then that you also, the place where the public information repository you picked is Knight Memorial Library on Elmwood Ave. So if that's in the community, if that's close enough to be part of the community, if this here is close enough to be part of the community, then we should consider South Providence to be the impacted community. And when you look at that, that is environmental justice. So why are you trying to get out of it? And I just want to close, and this is not for this site, but it has context to it. The gas leak that's been mentioned multiple times here tonight. Because that gas leak it occurred because of construction near high-pressure gas lines. And that construction, combined with the natural freeze-thaw cycle, or whatever they're saying now is the cause for it, caused this major, major gas leak, which we only found out later happened to have PCBs in it because of the fine journalism of Steve here with Rhode Island Future. Thank you. So there were 2 pounds of PCBs released from that pipeline next to a parking lot for the hospitals, and no public notification there. Now, Allen's Ave is my commute to work some days, so I was coming to work, and I noticed after we just learned that there were PCBs in that soil there, and that now there's contaminated soil in that spot next to the hospitals, right on Allen's Ave, right where it meets up with Eddie. So there's PCB-contaminated soil, and I went down there and I called in late to work, so I'm like, I'm not going to make it in time. I need to see what's going on here. So I called in sick for a few hours, and I wanted to ask what was going on. And all the workers said, we've been told we can't talk to anybody. And I said, well, do you know that there's PCBs in the soil? Were you informed of this? I don't know anything about that. They didn't have any respirators. They didn't have any safety suits. They were operating in backhoes, digging soil, which was blowing around. No one there knew anything about it. So that's that one site there. Bringing it back to the liquefaction site, the previous strap work that was done on the 1821 Holder capped area there, right along the corner of Allen's Ave and Terminal Road, which on paper sounds great. You did all the best practices, you controlled for the soil, you did the water spraying, everything was fine. There's a 400-page report saying how everything is fine. But I've been by that area when that work was being done, and I saw backhoes digging into the soil. I didn't see anybody monitoring or checking what was going on. I saw dust blowing off right from there onto Terminal Road, where there's the mattress drop-off and DPW and all kinds of people traveling on that road. That's a public road. So I don't think you have the best track record, and I don't think it matters what you say, because it might sound good at the beginning, you might make a report at the end that sounds good, but you've clearly violated these things in the past. DEM doesn't have the resources to be able to be out there monitoring and checking you. And then when people like me and other people in the community stop and drop by at it, we get stonewalled, even though there's people who are some of the technical experts here tonight who are on site when that PCB soil was being done, and I was told for 3 hours, someone's going to be coming, someone's going to be coming, someone's going to be coming. No one ever came to talk to me about it. They told me that no one there knew anything about the toxic soil, but yet William Howard was there on the site the whole time, apparently. So why couldn't he talk about it? So we don't trust you, and we don't think we have reason to trust you. And since this is about remediation, and this permit is for remediating the soil, we say remediate the whole soil, shut down the toxic fossil fuel facilities that are there, let's actually clean it up, and until you're actually going to do that, our remedial option is to say, don't do anything. Leave the area that's already been remediated capped. Do no more harm. Enough harm has been done already. We say no. End of story, bottom line, and we need DEM to back us up on that. Thank you.